Welcome to the Infinite Jungle. On today's episode, I am going to be sharing the second part of my interview with Lido's Dmitry Gusakov. The first part of our interview was about Lido's new community staking module, the CSM. This second part of our conversation is primarily focused on the viability of home staking on Ethereum. Dmitry talks about his experience spinning up a node and his views on how home stakers play a part in the decentralization of Ethereum and various kind of solutions or improvements that he thinks can be made to the Ethereum protocol to help home stakers stay part of the Ethereum network. So I hope you enjoy the rest of my conversation with Dmitry. Without further ado, here it is. More on the topic of the future viability of home staking. You mentioned that solo stakers they don't perform as well as professional operators, largely because they're not operating on the highest quality equipment. They don't have access to all of the capital that these other more professional entities do. There were many times on the core developer calls where developers were just saying, client teams were saying they have solo stakers in their Discord talking about how they're missing blocks since the Denkun upgrade. It does not seem like solo staking has a future on Ethereum. It just doesn't seem rational to be a solo staker or a home staker. Do you foresee in the future that, we're going to get a dwindling number? Solo staking was going to become extinct on Ethereum. Is that your view?
No, that's definitely not my view. And even though being a solo staker, vanilla solo staking, is technically irrational, the whole world is irrational. And if the world was operated only by rational rules or reasons, the world would definitely be different. So, first of all, I do think that there would be still, maybe not like a lot, but there would be still people willing to run vanilla solo staking validators with their own capital. They would most of them would most likely be like Ethereum OGs who were able to get significant amount of ETH back in the day, and I don't think that they would ever like massively quit solo staking. It makes no sense for them because at the end of the day, they are controlling their tokens, they are running validators on their own, no strings attached, no third parties involved. But for those who do not have this 32 ETH, or for example, have like slightly less than 32 ETH or 32 ETH plus something, CSM and many other protocols, again, including Rocket Pool, they do allow for this opportunity not only to spin up validators with less capital requirements, but they also allow for this potential of increased rewards. And specifically speaking about CSM, the potential for the increased rewards, which is up to 2.3 times, in pure ETH APR, so we are not talking about points or any third party tokens here, we are talking about pure ETH. If we take a look at the DeFi market right now, even if we look at the leverage staking, even at the peak of the leverage, the chances of you getting such high potentially increased rewards are very low. So this makes solo staking a bit more rational thing.
Okay,
The in
question about that though.
Yeah.
Because you need so much technical know-how. It's the execution layer, it's the consensus layer, it's the MEV boost, it's all of the Lido baggage, whatever the heck you need to get to do become a CSM person, compared to just going on a front end DeFi app and, degenning your way through for 500x leverage. I don't know. To be a validator and take people's users, you have to have the internet, the bandwidth, and then at that point, why don't you just become a business? Like, why don't you just become a professional staking business then?
Well, this is not a problem if you would start low as a home staker and then would decide to transform it into a small business. Well, that would be great and that would be beneficial for Ethereum, because the problem of Ethereum is not professional operators itself, is the limited amount of them. So the more professional operators, the better for Ethereum. And speaking of technical knowledge required, I would say that right now we are at the point where, first of all, Lido is not requiring any specific shit. So it is, the setup itself is purely identical to vanilla setup. No sidecars, no additional things, just consensus layer node, execution layer node, validator client if it is not embedded into consensus layer node, and MEV boost. And the thing is that there's a lot of these software to run validators. So like DAppNode, Stereo, Sedge, ETH Peeler, ETH Docker. I can name a lot more. Since the time, for example, like 2 years ago, all of them had developed that much and to that high standards that right now spinning up Ethereum validator on mainnet, even with Lido CSM, because all of these solutions, they do support CSM natively, so they facilitate the fact that you would set correct fee recipient, correct withdrawal credentials, they will do it on your behalf, they would help you to do so. It would literally take you like 5 minutes to do a setup. If you don't want to dive into technical details, the default setup would be made in this way. Yes, you need to wait for sync, but this is just waiting time. It does not require technical knowledge. And with the DAppNode, for example, you can even buy the machine that has the DAppNode software pre-installed. So I personally run my validators on the DAppNode, on a Lido branded DAppNode. I also have a bunch of other machines where I use ETH Docker because I also a big fan of ETH Docker. But with the DAppNode, my experience was as follows. So I opened the box, took the nuke out, plugged in internet connection, and you mentioned you need to have a bandwidth. Let's be realistic. We all love watching Netflix or YouTube or something like that. And in most places, we do have this bandwidth connection. I mean, my connection for I don't know how many, like 20 euros a month, is fiber directly to my apartment, and it is more than enough to run both testnet and mainnet validators. So you plug in your connection, which you already have, and you most likely already pay for it. You plug in power, you connect to web UI of your DAppNode. You do several clicks, like I want this client, and that client. Okay, and then the most complicated thing actually is generating keys. But generating keys is no different to creating your wallet, your traditional crypto wallet. So in the same way, you need to securely store your seed phrase, and then you need to specify the number of the keys you are willing to generate. And that's basically it. Then you import keys, and then you go to CSM UI, and in the same way, like you would stake your ETH, you would upload your keys and spin up CSM node operator. That's it. So the user experience part here is like a traditional staking, but with all these tools, it has become like way simpler. You need to do this traditional thing with key generation, again, the same for your traditional crypto wallet. And then the UI itself, where you interact with CSM to become node operator, is, from the complexity point of view, is identical to just staking your ETH. So you need to connect your wallet, add your keys, I mean your deposit data for sure, your private keys are always your private keys, and click a button, submit a transaction, that's it, one transaction. So I would say that the complexity had reduced since the very first time I've heard of solo staking. And with this potentially, I mean, the potential for increased rewards, plus the potential to contribute to Ethereum network, because even though we are saying, okay, this is technically complicated, but a lot of people, they do enjoy doing like technical things. I mean, people are building their own custom PCs. They're running nodes without running validators because they do like to contribute to Ethereum network. And actually, the potential, the amount of people who are joyful about tech, who like to deal with this tech, is actually way larger than the amount of people actually having 32 ETH. So with CSM's reduced entry barriers, increased rewards, and the ability to contribute to the network, it opens a huge potential for many, many more people who were not yet involved in Ethereum validation, because this part with the economical incentive And with the economical barrier, they were putting them aside and they just staked there like 3 ETH with any liquid staking protocol. But now, instead of doing so, they can also enjoy being in a true Ethereum folks and enjoy the tech that they like. I mean, I've heard about a lot of people who are building custom PCs, who are ordering like server parts or building some super cool machines, like with so many stories here. And again, people do enjoy it. And I do believe that there's way more people who enjoy tech than people who just have 32.
I don't know what kind of people you're talking to, but I've never heard of that. People enjoying the tech. But I take you at your word, Dmitry. I mean, given what you just said, which is quite optimistic, what percentage of the stake that's staked on Ethereum do you think is realistic will be operated and managed by solo stakers? Let's just say the CSM runs really well. You know, you mentioned all those benefits. I can see that it could, you know, attract many more solo stakers. Curious to know, what do you think is a realistic percentage, given the advantages and disadvantages of solo staking?
Well, given that these advantages are also available, would be available for professional operators as well, once the CSM is permissionless, I would say that my assumption, specifically about Lido, that around like within the not the end game, but within a year or so, we would probably see like from 2 to maybe 4% of Lido stake being operated by solo stakers, and I'm not speaking about the share of the module, because by that time I believe the module share would definitely reach 10%. But at the same time, I do think that professional or semi-professional operators would occupy a significant part of CSM. This is the reality. This is the reality of permissionlessness. Again, that's why I'm checking the UI like every day, every hour, to see if there's new community stakers, new solo stakers to join CSM, so that, I mean, my dream is to have the target share of 1% being reached before the new year, while early adoption period is still here, so that the proposal to increase share would be the first before CSM would become permissionless. Because by that time, we can be like almost 100% sure that if not all, but the absolute majority of those who joined during early adoption period are indeed community stakers, and that's great. After that, it would be really hard to detect who is who in a permissionless system. But again, my assumption is that by the end of 2025, we'll see something from 2 to 4% of Lido stake being operated by community stakers.
2 to 4%. I mean, that's still so low, though. That's so like sad. I mean, of all the optimistic things that you said, and then to reach for a goal that's 2 to 4%, that is just so small. I mean, okay, very last question for you, Dmitry, on that point. This upcoming upgrade, Pectra, it has a lot that's going to benefit staking pools. It has quite a bit that's going to help staking pools become more permissionless, a lot more communication from what smart contracts can trigger from the execution layer to the consensus layer, withdrawals, et cetera, et cetera. There's not a lot in the upgrade, though, that's really going to help solo stakers and home staking viability. Particularly, there's some questions about blob increases that could impact solo stakers and home stakers more so than professional staking entities. Dmitry, are there any protocol initiatives or protocol changes that you'd like to see to maybe have a future where it's not 2 to 4% of solo stakers, but like 5 to 10? Do you think that there's particular help that needs to be done from the ETH protocol developer side to change the reality of things?
Um, I think that the base protocol, the core protocol itself, should stay neutral as much as it can. And the things that are implemented on the protocol level should not be like specifically done for this or that audience. They should be beneficial in general. Uh, Even though out of the all initiatives, at least currently discussed, I think that the most viable one and the most meaningful one would probably be the one proposed by Vitalik to decrease the deposit size from 32 ETH to 1 ETH, even though it would not add this benefit for potentially higher rewards. It would open up the potential for those who are like ideologically with Ethereum, and for those who do not want to interact with like third party software with protocols, which is understandable and this is a good way, but still they have to face this 32 ETH limit, and this is a tremendous amount of money. So if this proposal would pass, and I think in this case we would see the increase in home stakers, not because of the rewards, not because of the economic viability, so that they would not be this I would say rational majority. Now, they would be out of those irrational minority. But what is important to mention about solo stakers, um, and about these percentages that you said that are disappointing,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of ETH staked total is incredibly high. We are talking about like fantastic numbers, like almost 30% of all ETH is staked at the moment. But the thing is that for the network decentralization, for network robustness, for network censorship resistant, and for credible neutrality, it is not that important to have like even distribution of this whole stake between like multiple entities. It is much more important to have this independent entities. And even if we would see like a very low percentage of stake being allocated to a significant amount of solo stakers, it would mean that the network itself is made out of multiple participants. And even though their weights in stake are different, from the practical perspective, let's take censorship resistance as an example. Even if we would have like a very, I don't know, like 5% of Ethereum being solo stakers, this 5% are significant to ensure censorship resistance. If this 5% are not censoring transactions, it would mean that some transactions would take longer to pass, but they would pass. And even this 5% would be enough. If we are talking about the recovery of the network, let's imagine, okay, so there's something bad happening in data centers in Germany and the United States, or for example, United States tomorrow, I don't know, after election would decide to fully ban staking. The more independent participants we have, even if their stake shares are not that significant, but they still run their full nodes, which would allow for the network recovery way faster, and which would that would allow again for network to keep operating, to stay as robust as it is, even though the amount of stake they control is not that high.
It's true, as long as you have 1% or even 2% of validators, you will eventually get a transaction in that is not censored. But ideally, wouldn't you want like 1 out of 10 blocks rather than 1 out of 100 to be able to feasibly get into a chain that in this like future that was being censored, or even in a future where the liveness of the chain is being jeopardized because a ton of people have to shut down all of their machines in the US? It would take time for the network to restabilize, to slash and then like start to slowly change like what the total effective balance of stake would be. It would be a lot easier in terms of recovery if 10% rather than 1 or 2 or 4% was the only kind of group. But I also recognize that in the context of even like Bitcoin, it's not so important that there is a large that the group of, I guess, like independent block builders, like block proposers. It's not that important. Like there's other aspects of decentralization, I guess, that even the Bitcoin community, which I still consider Bitcoin as like the most decentralized currency, cryptocurrency, I mean, um, even in that context, I think like this conversation around solo staking and home staking is not, it's like almost like a non-issue. Like the mining companies, the companies that produce the most hash rate, they're all public companies, they're all professional entities. So even if Ethereum heads towards that future where it's the professional entities that are building the blocks, in my head, I guess part of me is like, maybe that's all right. Maybe that's not that big of a deal.
That's the reality of the permissionless system. Again, as
Right.
I mentioned in the very beginning. So for sure, having like more allocation to solo staker or even allocation between as many entities as possible is definitely beneficial. But this is realistically unfeasible because if you want to achieve it, you can achieve it, but you will make system not permissionless. You will make it permission. And if you want to keep the system permissionless, the only thing you can do is you can somehow incentivize this or that behavior so that the reality would either follow or not follow your incentives. And I think that a huge contribution by the staking protocols here, by the liquid staking protocols, again, like Lido, Rocket Pool, and many others, is that they allow for these different options of the out of protocol incentivization that helps to increase this number. But this number is actually like super hard to increase because of the permissionless nature of Ethereum staking. But again, it is what it is, and like having 1% today and 2% a year after is a huge increase and is definitely better than having like 0.5% a year after. So we're doing our best, I mean, as much as we can.
No, that's fair. That's fair. That's a good point. It's a doubling effectively. We love those big increases. Well, thank you so much, Dmitry, for spending the time to talk with me about the CSM and share your thoughts on the viability of home staking on Ethereum at large. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I want to thank you, all of our listeners who are tuning in to this conversation. Thank you for tuning into the Infinite Jungle podcast. We hope, Dmitry and I hope, that you learned something new about Ethereum and about the staking ecosystem on Ethereum and about the CSM, of course. We hope that you'll tune in again for another episode. I am signing off from the concrete jungle that is New York City. Dmitry, where are you signing off from?
From Barcelona.
From Barcelona. Wow, beautiful. So we are signing off from Barcelona and from New York City. In your explorations of the infinite jungle that is Ethereum, stay safe out there.